Alrighty. So, hey everybody, my name is Elijah Holland, or better known as DJ. I'm a chef, a forager, a hunter, and a fisherman. A couple years ago, Rene Redzepi came out to Australia on a journey in the search of the weird and wonderful ingredients that Australia has to offer. A good friend and customer of mine, Grant King, one of the pioneers of the Australian hospitality industry, put me up to the task. I rocked up to the meeting with a whole bunch of other suppliers and procurers with a couple of eskies full of bounty. I proceeded to cover about 3 trestle tables with over 200 different types of wild and foraged edible plants, fruits, berries, nuts, twigs, barks, vegetables, seaweeds, and mushrooms. I'd spent about 5 days racing up and down the rugged and urban areas of the northern beaches, the Blue Mountains, and everywhere in between. And excitedly started explaining everything in meticulous detail. Rene said, "Wow, this is insane. I've never seen some of this stuff ever in my life. It's absolutely incredible." And he promptly told me I would be working for him next year, to my dumbfounded joy. A couple of days later, I'd just gotten back to the restaurant which I was head chef at, from out foraging with my mate Boyan. We had just come across an extremely valuable treasure, countless trees covered in kilos of lemon aspen, which is a native Australian rainforest berry and indigenous bush tucker food, which has beautiful aromatic lemon, lime, and grapefruit flavours, with a mild acidity and being very high in antioxidants. We were in the kitchen talking and discussing about what was to be done with them and what specials I was going to come up with. And all of a sudden, Rene rocked up to the kitchen. We quickly ran out and greeted him, asked him to come in, and excitedly showed him what we had found. "Wow, is that lemon aspen?" "You bet it is," I said. I think I was hoping to be able to use it for a special, but the next thing I knew, Rene was saying to me, "The flavour's phenomenal. This I need you to save all for me." And I was like, "What? You mean everything?" And he meant every last one. So I preserved all of it, about 10 to 15 kilos, to be used the following year on the Noma Australia menu. And this is how I ended up being the head forager and chef at Noma Australia, an immeasurable experience of a lifetime. For me, though, it all started through Nature's Pick, a business I started with my best mate when I was 20 years old. I've always loved the outdoors and been in and around it, coming from a family with parents who are into permaculture, mad horticulturalists, botanists, and general outdoors people, who would always be taking us kids out to the country where we'd pick different herbs, plants, fruits, and other things from areas around Australia to put on the table for something yummy and part of the meal. One day I caught up my best mate, Boyan Gadanovic, a chef who was also an avid hunter, spear fisherman, forager, outdoors person as myself, and hit him up with the idea of foraging and picking wild edibles from around the area of the northern beaches and supplying them to restaurants around the area and some in the city. "Fantastic, I've been thinking about something like this as well. Let's do it," he said. We spent weeks exploring the area, compiling lists of all the different wild edible species that we had available in the area. We started off with one restaurant, and after successfully supplying them for about 6 months, we decided to go bigger and offer more restaurants our produce. Soon we were supplying most of the top restaurants around Sydney, Aria, Mark, The Establishment, or Mejo, to name a couple, with our foraged edibles and other products we were making, such as fermented black garlics, onions, wildflower cordials, among many. Much to our surprise, funnily enough, a lot of this produce came from the very outskirts or near the front of some of these restaurants. So one day we received an order from a restaurant for chickweed, nasturtiums, beech mustard, sea lettuce, marsh pennyworts, and violets. I headed out for the order, which happened to be about 50 to 100 metres away from the restaurant. In and around the beach, I proceeded to pick their weekly order. After a good 45 minutes or more, I walked into their restaurant and dropped their order off and collected my invoice. After this, I had to stop and have a chuckle. Did that really just happen? I just picked all of this from out the front of their restaurant while they unknowingly haven't a clue it's there. I called Boyan and we had a laugh about it. But then I started to realize that we can do better than that. And if everybody, and we're chefs, and everybody can take a second to look around and see what's around them, then they'll have a better understanding and appreciation for what they're doing and why. So instead of keeping the same momentum, we slowed down the business and started to try to make the chefs we worked with and everybody else along the way more aware of what's really out there, where it can be found and why, and to educate them on what is the foremost and most important reasons of cooking and eating, knowing where your food or product comes from. We all evolved and survived as a species as foragers, living off the land, which has been a normality and a staple part of many people's businesses and lives for many years. These days, it's so easy to walk into a grocery store and buy or order anything that we've started to forget why it's important to know where your food comes from. And thus, foraging has been somewhat forgotten. A lot of people, when they think of foraging, have this idea that it must be hours away at remote locations, completely out of reach. But realistically, foraging is and can be everywhere. On your back doorstep, in urban areas, parks, beaches. In fact, everywhere you look, there's something wild and edible just waiting to be plucked. Of course, you must be wary of where it is and not pick from polluted areas. But the beauty about foraging is what you sometimes least expect to find somewhere will be there, regardless of where you may be, what country or continent, Wild food is everywhere. Yes, you may not know exactly what it is or what to do with it or where it comes from, but that's the fun part. Research it, explore it, learn about it, and you find yourself realizing that, hey, this is a berry that was used by indigenous Australian tribes hundreds of years ago, or these are edible plants and herbs from South Africa or the Philippines or China. What on earth are they doing here? Like humans and animals, plants adapt and change to various landscapes and climates. They come and go with the wind and Mother Nature's bidding. So the fun thing about that is you'll never exactly be sure of what you will or you won't find somewhere, which leads you to the fun part of finding out what to do with it, what dish you will create, the different cultural heritage it may have, or where it comes from, how it is usually prepared. You find yourself then in a place of food diversity while you may be in a completely different country, area, or region. Without you even noticing it, you're helping bridge the gap between food diversity through gastronomy, while foraging is the driver. One of my favorite quotes in the world that I feel relates strongly for me and many others of what I love about foraging, hunting, fishing, and most of all cooking is from Brillat Savarin's book, The Physiology of Taste. The discovery of a new dish confers more happiness on humanity than the discovery of a new star. How true is that? A quick funny little story. One night I was out sometime after midnight picking a plant called heartleaf ice plant, Aptinia cordifolia, a succulent which is native to South Africa. It's a perennial plant with a sweet, juicy and slightly lemony tang to it, which is now naturalized and grows wild all over Australia, has been used as an ornamental plant. Boyan and I were along the side of the road with our head torches on, picking hordes of containers off the side of a cliff. And while we were picking, we heard a car pull up next to us with sirens, which we soon came to realize it meant it was a police car. An officer leaned out of the window of the car and she said, "Hey, what are you guys up to? What's going on?" I told her, "We're just picking edible weeds," and she laughed and said, "Yeah, right." I told her, no, seriously, we're picking edible weeds, and I proceeded to explain it to her and tell her how tasty it was. I plopped some in my mouth and crunched on it and said, "See, it's delicious." I walked on over to her and placed some in her mouth through the car window to try. She munched on it and with great surprise said, "Wow, that's delicious. I'm sorry we can't stay and help you. Have a great night." The following year, we'd picked hundreds of kilos of the same beautiful plant, and it was now in the hands of Renee and on the Noma Australia menu. Here you see once again food diversity brought together through gastronomy and the importance of foraging. A South African plant in Australia found by Australians being used by a Danish bloke to feed countless diners from all over the world. After Noma Australia, I spent the last year and a half doing pop-ups, hunting, spearfishing, foraging, and using what the wild terroir, local terrain, farms and produce has to offer all over New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, Mexico, Philippines, Vietnam, and now finally find myself in China and opening the Locksmith. There we go. So, the Locksmith is a multi-concept and leveled venue in the Guangdong province in the south of China. Situated in the historic area of Foshan's Lingnan Tindi. We rely on produce grown on site from local farms and forage from the wild terroir of mountainous areas, jungles, forests from around the Guangdong province. The Locksmith's menu and concept is influenced by the landscape, my upbringing, and making everything from scratch in the restaurant, from our breads, butters, vinegars, charcuterie, and anything that makes it onto the plate. I think the thing that sets myself as different to others, or what I'm trying to do to be different is, and from much inspiration from Renee, to create a story, an experience, an education, not just a meal. Because what does everybody love more than anything else? A story. People love stories. And in stories, people learn, they get fixed, attached, and in turn educate themselves and others. Whether foraging drives you out into the rugged wilderness or into the urban wilderness, where you must explore and you must create a story for yourself, take what you've experienced and found and then create food that is imbued with the passion you have unearthed, and portray it to people the fun you experience getting to that place. How good is that? The more people who can get out, forage, explore and learn more, then the more food diversity will start traveling like wildfire around the world. It can only really come from one thing at the end of the day, and that's gastronomy. Because let's face it, everybody wants to eat a better, tastier meal that intrigues and excites the mind and palate. The biggest and easiest thing is to pick up a book, read, ask, research, teach yourself, and more importantly, open your eyes and explore the beautiful world around you. Thank you very much for listening.